Native Americans had no fireplaces, no chimneys, no wood stoves, yet they were warmer than Europeans with their blazing hearths. Sounds impossible? One simple technique they used generated more heat than any fireplace ever could. Why don't we use this anymore? When European settlers first encountered Native American dwellings, they probably scratched their heads and wondered, where's the chimney? Well, turns out they were looking at something far more sophisticated than their own smoke-filled cabins. Let's start with the teepee, that iconic cone-shaped home that was basically the RV of the plains. But here's what most people miss. These weren't just tents thrown together. The teepee's design was pure genius, wrapped in buffalo hide. That cone shape? It worked like a natural chimney. Hot air and smoke rose straight up while fresh air got pulled in at the bottom. Meanwhile, the real heat, the stuff you actually wanted, circulated around the base where families lived. It's like having a built-in HVAC system, except it was invented centuries before anyone knew what HVAC meant. Then, there were those adjustable smoke flaps at the top. Think of them as the world's first smart home feature. Families could open, close, or angle these flaps depending on wind direction and weather. Too much smoke? Adjust the flaps. Storm coming? Close them up tight. It gave people complete control over their indoor climate. But the real magic happened with the layering system. Double-layered hides and bark coverings created an insulation sandwich that could keep interiors up to 20 degrees warmer than outside temperatures. That's the difference between freezing and comfortable. Literally a matter of life and death during those brutal prairie winters. Over in the eastern woodlands, wigwams took a different approach, but with the same smart thinking. These dome-shaped homes used flexible saplings as the frame, then got covered with layers of bark, hides, or even earth. The result? A sturdy, weather-resistant shelter that could handle everything from blizzards to summer storms. What made both designs absolutely brilliant was their seasonal adaptability. Need to move to follow the buffalo herds? Pack up the teepee in an hour. Want extra insulation for winter? Add another layer of covering. Planning to stay put for a few months? Build a wigwam that'll keep you cozy. These homes combine three things most modern houses struggle with: portability, comfort, and smart use of whatever materials were lying around. No Home Depot required. The best part? Families could set these up faster than most people today can assemble IKEA furniture. And unlike that wobbly bookshelf, these shelters actually worked perfectly the first time. But staying warm wasn't just about clever architecture. Some tribes took an entirely different approach, one that involved digging down instead of building up. While teepees were brilliant for life on the move, some Native American tribes had a completely different approach to beating winter's fury. They literally went underground. Earth lodges were like nature's version of a luxury bunker. These weren't just holes in the ground with a roof slapped on top. They were engineering marvels that would make your modern contractor weep with envy. The thick earthen walls and roofs acted as natural insulation so effective that families could sit comfortably inside while blizzards raged overhead. Here's where it gets clever. Many of these lodges were built partially underground, sometimes 3 to 4 feet down. Why? Because Mother Earth keeps a steady temperature about 6 feet below the surface, around 55 to 60 degrees year-round. It's like having a built-in heating system that never breaks down or sends you a monthly bill. The Hidatsa and Mandan tribes were absolute masters at this. Their earth lodges could house entire extended families. We're talking 20 to 40 people sharing one cozy space. Makes your family holiday gatherings look like a peaceful tea party, right? But here's the real genius part. These structures required minimal wood to stay warm. While other folks were constantly chopping firewood like lumberjacks on espresso, earth lodge dwellers could maintain steady heat for days with just a small fire. The earthen walls trapped every bit of warmth and slowly released it back into the living space. The construction process was fascinating too. First, they'd dig out the foundation, then create a wooden frame using cottonwood posts. Over this went layers of willow branches, grass, and finally, thick earth, sometimes 2 feet deep. The entrance was a covered tunnel that angled upward, preventing cold air from rushing straight into the living area. These weren't temporary winter shelters either. A well-built earth lodge could last 10 to 15 years with proper maintenance. That's longer than some modern apartment leases. The durability meant families could invest time in making them genuinely comfortable. Built-in storage areas, designated cooking spaces, even separate sleeping quarters for different family groups. What really amazes me is how these lodges handled moisture control. The earth walls naturally regulated humidity, while the central fire pit, positioned perfectly for heat distribution, kept everything dry and warm. No condensation dripping on your head at 3 in the morning. The communal aspect was crucial too. When 30 people share one heated space, body heat alone adds significant warmth. Smart planning meant everyone stayed cozy while building stronger family and tribal bonds. But earth lodges weren't the only way Native Americans turned raw materials into winter survival gear. The real magic happened when they transformed every part of their hunt into... Ever wonder why your expensive winter jacket costs $300? Well, Native Americans figured out better insulation thousands of years ago using nothing but what walked, flew, or swam nearby. Animal hides weren't just clothing. They were survival systems. Think about it. Animals literally evolved to survive the exact same brutal winters that could kill humans in hours. Their fur and skin had already solved the thermal engineering problem. Native Americans just had to be smart enough to borrow it. But here's where it gets interesting. They didn't just throw on a random deer skin and call it good. The process started with understanding which animals provided the best protection. Bison hides? Thick, durable, perfect for outer layers and shelter walls. Rabbit fur? Incredibly soft and warm, ideal for next-to-skin comfort. Elk hides were the Goldilocks option. Not too thick, not too thin, just right for most clothing needs. Then there's the craftsmanship part that would make modern engineers jealous. They discovered that smoke-curing hides didn't just preserve them, it made them naturally waterproof. The tanning process using animal brains created leather so supple it moved like fabric but blocked wind like armor. My grandmother's old leather coat feels like cardboard compared to what these folks were creating with stone tools and patience. Here's something that'll blow your mind. They wasted absolutely nothing. Hair scraped off during hide preparation, perfect insulation for moccasin linings, sinew from tendons, natural thread that got stronger when wet instead of breaking apart like plant fibers. Even bone marrow became waterproofing grease. The efficiency is honestly embarrassing for those of us who throw away half our groceries. Arctic tribes took this to another level entirely. They'd layer seal skin under caribou fur, under more seal skin, creating what was basically a biological spacesuit. Each layer had a specific job: moisture wicking, insulation, wind protection, waterproofing. Makes sense, right? When stepping outside means potential death in 20 minutes, you don't mess around with amateur hour clothing design. But the real genius wasn't just wearing animal skins, it was understanding how to modify them for different situations. Summer hunting required lighter, more breathable hides. Winter travel demanded maximum warmth with flexibility. Fishing near water needed waterproof outer layers that could shed ice. Every hide was customized like a tailored suit, except the tailor was survival itself. And speaking of layers, these folks didn't just randomly pile on animal skins and hope for the best. They developed sophisticated layering systems that would make modern outdoor gear companies take notes. You know how your grandmother always told you to dress in layers before heading out into the cold? Well, she wasn't being original. Native Americans perfected this technique centuries before modern outdoor gear companies existed. And frankly, they did it better than most of us do today. The secret wasn't just throwing on more clothes, it was strategic layering that worked like a personal climate control system. The inner layer consisted of soft, lightweight furs that sat directly against the skin. Think rabbit, fox, or deer hide, materials that trapped body heat while allowing moisture to escape. This wasn't your average undershirt situation. Then came the middle layer, the workhorse of the system. Thicker hides like elk or caribou provided serious insulation without the bulk that would make movement impossible during hunting or daily tasks. But here's where it gets clever. These layers weren't sewn together permanently. They could be added or removed faster than a teenager changing outfits for prom. The outer layer? Pure genius. Heavy, weather-resistant materials like bison hide or specially treated leather acted as a shield against wind, snow, and rain. Some tribes even used bird feathers woven between layers, creating what was essentially a prehistoric down jacket. Makes you wonder why it took us so long to figure out goose down, doesn't it? Regional variations tell fascinating stories about adaptation. Arctic tribes went all in with thick fur parkas that could keep someone warm in temperatures that would make a polar bear complain. Meanwhile, plains tribes developed lighter, more flexible systems perfect for their mobile lifestyle and unpredictable weather patterns. The real brilliance was in the details. Sleeves could be tied tight or loosened depending on activity level. Hoods were designed to stay put during fierce winds without blocking peripheral vision, crucial when you're tracking game or watching for threats. Even the way garments were cut allowed for air circulation when needed, preventing the dangerous overheating that modern hikers still struggle with. Each piece served multiple purposes too. A winter robe doubled as a blanket. Leggings protected against thorns and cold while allowing full range of motion. Nothing was single use because resources were too precious to waste. The whole system required zero electricity, produced no carbon footprint, and lasted for years with proper care. Meanwhile, we're still trying to create synthetic materials that match the performance of what they achieved with animal hides and clever design. But clothing was just one piece of their warming puzzle. The real game changer involves something you probably walk past every day without thinking twice about it. Ever tried warming your bed with a hot water bottle? Well, Native Americans figured out something even better centuries before rubber was invented. They turned ordinary rocks into personal heating systems that would make your grandmother's electric blanket jealous. Here's the genius part. They didn't just grab any old stone from the creek. That's rookie mistake territory right there. Certain rocks, like slate or river stones, could crack or literally explode when heated too fast. Talk about a rude awakening at 2 in the morning. Instead, experienced tribes knew exactly which stones were the reliable performers. The process was surprisingly sophisticated. Stones were carefully selected during daylight hours and placed near, not in, the fire for several hours. This slow heating method prevented thermal shock while storing massive amounts of heat energy. Think of each stone as a primitive battery, except instead of powering your phone, it powered your comfort through brutal winter nights. But here's where it gets really clever. These weren't just bed warmers. Heated stones served multiple purposes that would impress any modern efficiency expert. They warmed sleeping areas, yes, but also dried wet clothing, kept food from freezing, and even provided therapeutic heat for sore muscles after long hunting expeditions. The portability factor was incredible too. Unlike a campfire that stays put, these heated stones could travel wherever warmth was needed most, moving from one sleeping area to another. Just wrap your trusty stone in hide and carry your personal heater along. Different tribes developed their own techniques for maximizing stone heat. Some wrapped them in layers of soft leather to control heat release. Others placed them in specially woven baskets that could be moved safely without burning fingers. The Plains tribes even created stone warming competitions to see whose rocks could stay warm the longest, because apparently even survival techniques needed a competitive edge. The really impressive part? A properly heated stone could radiate warmth for 6 to 8 hours. That's an entire night's sleep powered by one afternoon's preparation. Modern heating pads can barely manage 4 hours on a single charge, and they need electricity. Well, stones weren't the only heat source Native Americans mastered. The real social genius happened when they brought everyone together around something that served as both a furnace and living room combined. If you think modern families argue over who gets the remote, try sharing one fire with 20 relatives during a blizzard. Yet for Native American communities, the communal fire pit wasn't just about survival, it was the beating heart of everything. Picture your neighborhood coffee shop, but replace the barista with a firekeeper and the Wi-Fi with actual warmth. That's essentially what these central fires became. Families didn't just huddle around for heat. They planned their entire social calendar around that crackling centerpiece. But here's where it gets brilliant. Fire placement wasn't some, let's put it here decision. These folks had fire positioning down to a science that would make modern HVAC engineers weep with envy. The pit had to be perfectly centered to distribute heat evenly, yet positioned to catch natural drafts that would pull smoke up and out. Too close to the entrance, cold air rushes in. Too far back, you're sleeping in a smoke cloud thicker than your uncle's stories. The real magic happened with fuel management. While we panic when our phone battery hits 20%, these communities kept fires burning for months with mathematical precision. They knew exactly which wood burned hottest, which lasted longest, and which combination would give them 12 hours of steady warmth without constant tending. And let's talk about the social geniuses here. When you're forced to gather around one heat source every evening, something beautiful happens. Kids learn from elders. Stories get passed down. Problems get solved collectively. It's like having a mandatory family meeting, except nobody groans because, well, you'll freeze if you skip it. The firekeeper role was basically being the neighborhood's most important person. These weren't just people who knew how to light matches. They were thermal engineers, weather predictors, and community organizers rolled into one. They could read wind patterns, judge wood quality, and somehow keep that fire going through howling storms that would defeat our fancy gas fireplaces. What really blows my mind is how they turned a survival necessity into a social institution. The fire didn't just warm bodies, it warmed relationships. Arguments got settled, marriages got arranged, and hunting strategies got planned, all while staying toasty. Then there's the efficiency factor. One well-managed fire could heat an entire extended family while using half the wood that individual fires would consume. It's like carpooling, but for warmth. But even the best fire couldn't overcome everything. When winter storms turned truly vicious, smart placement of that shelter became absolutely critical. You could build the world's best insulated shelter, but put it in the wrong spot, you might as well be camping in a meat freezer. Native Americans understood something that even today's architects are still figuring out. Location beats construction every single time. Think your grandpa's picky about his recliner placement? These folks were choosing shelter spots like their lives depended on it. Because, well, they did. The golden rule was simple. Find nature's own windbreaks first, build second. Dense forests became natural walls against howling winter winds. Rocky outcroppings and hillsides offered protection that no amount of extra hide layers could match. It's like having a bouncer at the door, keeping all the troublemakers out. But here's where it gets clever. River bends weren't just picked for water access. The curved landscape created pockets of calm air, almost like nature's own little heat bubbles. Meanwhile, those ridgelines that look so dramatic in movies, absolutely terrible for staying warm. Wind hits those spots like a freight train. Then there's the sunrise strategy that would make any real estate agent proud. East-facing entrances weren't about feng shui. They were about capturing every precious ray of morning sun. That first light hitting your shelter meant the difference between waking up refreshed or waking up like a popsicle. Some tribes took protection to the next level, creating their own artificial windbreaks. Fallen logs became strategic barriers. Brush piles transformed into shields. During heavy snow seasons, they'd even build snow walls, using winter's own weapon against it. Pretty smart for folks without engineering degrees, right? The really brilliant part? They'd test these spots during different seasons before committing. No lease agreements needed, just pure observation. They'd notice how wind patterns changed, where snow drifted heaviest, which areas stayed dry during storms. Valley floors might seem cozy, but cold air sinks like a rock. Smart placement meant finding that sweet spot on hillsides, high enough to avoid the cold pool below, low enough to stay protected from ridge winds. It's like finding the perfect temperature in a swimming pool, except the wrong choice could literally freeze you. This wasn't just about staying warm either. Good placement meant less firewood needed, less time spent maintaining heat, more energy for hunting, and food preparation. But even the perfect location meant nothing without knowing how to keep that precious warmth inside once you had it. The real magic happened in the daily survival techniques that turned basic shelter into a winter fortress. You know how your grandmother always had those little tricks that seemed almost magical? Well, Native Americans had survival hacks that would make your Swiss Army knife jealous. Take heated sand, for instance. Before electric blankets existed, tribes would heat sand near the fire and wrap it in animal hides. This created portable warmth that lasted for hours, way better than those hand warmers you lose in your coat pocket every winter. The sand held heat longer than stones and molded perfectly around cold feet or aching backs during long, brutal nights. But here's where things get really clever. Fire-starting materials weren't stored in some fancy waterproof container. Nope. They kept tinder, dry bark, and flint tucked inside their clothing right against their bodies. Body heat kept everything bone dry and ready for emergencies. Smart? You bet. Imagine explaining that to your insurance company today. The cooking setup was pure genius too. Instead of building everything on level ground like most folks would think, they dug cooking areas slightly lower than sleeping spaces. Why? Heat rises, dummy. Hot air from cooking fires would naturally flow upward, warming the sleeping areas above. It's like having a built-in heating system that your ancestors figured out centuries before central air was even a dream. Then there's the moisturizer trick that beats anything you'll find at the pharmacy. Animal fat and oils weren't just for cooking. They rubbed this natural protection all over exposed skin to prevent frostbite and windburn. No fancy marketing campaigns needed. Just pure, effective protection that actually worked when your life depended on it. And speaking of life-saving techniques, let's talk about heat zones. Families would arrange sleeping hides in tight circles, creating these compact warmth pockets that trapped body heat overnight. Think of it like a medieval sleeping bag party, except way more effective, and nobody complained about someone hogging the covers. Every single action had a thermal purpose, where they positioned their bodies while sleeping, how they arranged their gear, even the way they breathed in extreme cold through their nose to warm incoming air before it hit their lungs. These weren't random tricks either. Each technique was tested through generations of harsh winters where mistakes meant death. No second chances, no backup heating systems, just pure, refined survival wisdom passed down through families who understood that staying warm wasn't about comfort. It was about living to see another spring. That's the kind of practical intelligence that kept entire communities alive when nature threw everything she had at them.